Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Beyond the Album Cover with yours truly, Jarrell Mason, or better known as Jay Mace, where not only do we talk with people from the music industry, we talk to people from all walks of life, especially in my former profession of education. I was a special ed teacher at one point in time, and I have with me right now a dear person that is very special to me. He was influential in the 252 area of North Carolina, where I am from. Him, along with Tammy Sutton, founded a school called KIP, and it has done tremendous things for the community. But he got his start teaching sixth grade English language arts at GMS. Shout out to everybody that went to GMS. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause for Mr. Caleb Dolan. Mr. Dolan, welcome to Beyond the Album Cover.
I'm thrilled, and I didn't even realize I could subscribe to you on Spotify. I just looked this up.
Yes, you sure can. I'm on all streaming platforms and video content on YouTube, my YouTube channel, J85. So I'm everywhere.
That's awesome. That is wicked.
Yeah, who knew that I would be doing this when you saw me walking across the halls as a little sixth grader?
Seriously, right? We wouldn't even know that that you'd be able to video call and
yeah, who knew? Because
what the heck's a podcast?
Yeah, I remember those days of those old bulky Gateway 2000 desktop computers, and you had to wait for School Link to dial up.
Totally right. I joke like that we didn't do email as a school,
so it was still hard copies of everything, having to go make copies at the office.
Yep. There was a really cruel librarian who wouldn't even let me make copies very often.
Oh, I know who the librarian is. We're not going to say his name, but if you've been in and around the 252 area, your mom, your aunt, your uncle, your cousins, know some of the teachers that you had. Because I had some teachers tell me like, oh, I taught your mama. Oh, I taught your cousin. Oh, I taught your nephew. And that's when you know you're old. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Tell people a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how'd you end up in Teach for America, and then Gaston Middle School around fall of 97.
Yeah. Well, I am from rural Maine, a small town, Stephen King country, if you will. I grew up on a dirt road, never saw neighbors, but had a marvelous time growing up. And by the time I was in college, I always like to say that I talked a lot of, white guy liberal smack, like I'm, save the world, fight injustice. And by the time I got to be a senior, I was like, I better put my money where my mouth is. And I thought I would go into this organization at the time was really new, Teach for America. Showed up to my interview in hiking boots, which was not very professional, but I didn't know otherwise. Though I requested to go to New York City, they placed me in rural North Carolina. It's one of those twists of fate that everything that follows in my life kind of owes itself to. Interviewed for a job and Jarrell, you'll appreciate this as a former special educator. It's like the first job I interviewed for was to be a self-contained teacher in a classroom of students with behavioral disabilities. That is a job that I was not qualified for, would have not been ready for at all. Luckily, I think the principal of that school realized it. My next job, the next interview I went to was for Gaston Middle School. And I wound up teaching remedial reading my first year, and then taught sixth grade. But by the time you came, I was a sixth grade teacher there for the next 4 years in total before we opened KIP Gaston College Prep down the road.
All right. So what was your first take when you first landed in Gaston, North Carolina, seeing the Blue Flame gas station? For those of you that don't know, we're going to be using a lot of local references. So Blue Flame, yeah. It's truck stop now, but it was a Zitco gas station where you could get the best bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich in the morning. And then right across the street from the middle school, it's Hardee's restaurant, and then it was a Shell gas station, which is no longer existent. And the funny thing about the middle school that was actually the former high school of the town before Northampton County consolidated Gunberry High School and Gaston High to form Northampton County High School West when I was going, but it's now Northampton County High. And it was where my mom, my aunt, my dad went to high school. So it was amazing to see all the trophies and see like, oh, my aunt went here, my mom went here, my dad went here. So what was your take first landing into Gaston Middle School, Gaston, North Carolina, and probably in for a little bit of a culture shock?
Oh my goodness, yeah. It was such a culture shock in so many ways. I don't know if you remember though, that same trophy case, there were pictures of the classes, and you could sort of see the point at which there were desegregation, and then saw white flight. Like the classes went from all white to multiracial to all black in just the span of a few years. I just remember that so vividly in the trophy case. And yeah, I mean, I grew up, like I said, in rural Maine, which is 99% white. I had no experience with the South, no experience in the African American community. And, right away, I mean, the first thing, right, is picking up on accents. It took me a while, to know what people were saying. And then by 3 years later, it's like my dad's like, "Why are you saying y'all?" But it was really just like experiencing a dramatically different culture where and that was a real joy of it. Like the first time going to church with people, the first time eating, whether it was the Carolina barbecue or
Bojangles.
Yeah, yeah, all those places. It was really trying to be open to learning a new place and recognizing I was the outsider, and trying to make sure I was learning, not just assuming I knew what was going on.
Now, in most rural areas, some schools are considered Title One, which means that they get more federal funding from the government because of the areas that they're in. So, what was that like coming in teaching, knowing that okay, I maybe had some kids that they're living with grandma, mama and daddy's not in the home. They live in a dirt path and maybe struggling check to check or whatever the circumstances, and not knowing everything that is going on behind the scenes just so that they can get on the bus and go to school.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a really good question, Jarrell. I mean, on one hand, it's one of the amazing things is kids and people are brilliant and amazing and fun and joyful wherever you are, no matter the circumstance. And like that was a lot of the experience of it for me is these yeah, kids, whether it was a single wide trailer in a dirt path or whatever, they were so willing to like work hard. They're so wanted to learn. That stuff's true of all children. And at the same time, especially now, I'm really aware of all the systemic disadvantages put as barriers to people in Gaston. It's all, I live now in Massachusetts, where there's so much public funding, and there are 4 or 5 social workers in our school. And I think like there were barely any mental health services in our school there, back then. And,
Or a nurse, because when I was teaching out here and I saw that a school had a nurse, I was like, we didn't have a nurse at our school.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. No, yeah, you have to have a nurse up here. You're required to, and we, never could afford one. And even stuff like I was photocopying all my, if I wanted books from the class, I bought them. I couldn't get
trust
order
me,
novels.
I understand paying out of pocket for supplies. It ain't cheap.
Yep. Yeah. But it makes me all the more amazed at people's, in Gaston, the young men and women like yourself who I knew, who just have always been able to figure stuff out and find ways to survive and thrive, even when it's set up to say, no, you can't survive and thrive. And I mean, definitely though, there's a lot of I don't think a lot of people who haven't lived in rural areas sort of understand also like the isolation of it. You know, the idea that, you know, it's 2 hours to this thing, it's 2 hours to that. You know, Chapel Hill felt like a million miles away, even though it was only 2 hours away. You know.
Yeah, and I say it's because of teachers like yourself, Miss Sutton, that I had taken a tour to Duke when I was in seventh grade, and it
Yep.
was where we saw Corey Maggette, Shane Battier, Elton Brand before they became NBA stars, and
Yep.
just to for me to set foot on Duke's campus and say, oh, there's a possibility that I can one day go here. Is you open up that mind to say there's more than just Gaston, Henrico, Ronald Rapids, or whatever adjacent areas that I can dream bigger and further than previous generations could due to circumstances. And you all provided us the ability to have no lid and be able to dream far and dream big.
Wow. Well, yeah, I mean that by the way is one of my favorite memories because we walking around Duke's campus and we talked our way into that
Yeah,
preseason
because
game
I
with the
think I
Australian
remember you or
team.
Miss Sutton went up to the front and said something because we were sitting by the band section. And I was like, how do we sit behind the band section? I was thankful for going, even though I'm a Carolina fan through and through. But
Oh yeah.
it was all good though. But those prices at Duke, I can see why
Nope.
a lot of kids from up north would go to Duke because Duke costs money. So what led to you and Miss Sutton finding GCP?
Yeah. Yeah. So you know the I think one of the things that was hard, right, was it, you know, there were all every. I mean, any school in the country you can find great teachers. I genuinely believe that, but there are a lot of places where the system isn't set up for there to be consistency across the school and year. So I would, you know, we would, and I was just learning to teach, but you know, willing to work hard at it. And we saw, you know, you got some of you guys would, I'd have a kid as a sixth grader, probably a friend or cousin of yours, and if they got, you know, if they got Miss Sutton, they'd have a great seventh grade year. But sometimes if they didn't, they wouldn't. And then you'd see kids by ninth and 10th grade really struggling. And so we talked a lot, you know, all the time, you know, what if, you know, somebody could build a school that where it was consistently great year after year for kids. And the opportunity came when Kip, the founders of the two original Kip schools in New York and the Bronx, um, you know, they received some philanthropy to support opening new schools. You know, the first three new schools in the country, first time they'd replicated. And because they were in the sort of Teach for America alumni network, they called. I didn't call them back for 2 weeks because I was coaching track at the time. Were you? I think you played baseball. Do I remember that right?
I
No.
played football. That was the only sport I played. I
Only sport
wanted to
was
do
football. Okay,
basketball,
couldn't.
but no, I only did football.
Only football. Okay. So track was so I was, you know, I kept home late for track practice. So like, I'll call that guy back. Call that. Finally, but we hit it off. They said, you know, you can go open a school. We've got deals to, you know, with the mayor of Atlanta, governor of Colorado, and we're like, well, actually, we want to open a school right here in this town we're in. And luckily, you know, they bought in, and we opened. I went for a year to study being a leader, a founding leader, and we opened in 2000 in Gaston. You know, after about speaking of all the dirt roads, you know, I had to recruit 80 kids. So I did 80 to 95 home visits that year to try to recruit kids and families.
Man, that is so crazy. And I know that it was originally a peanut field because I remember
Yep.
driving by it. I used to live not too far from the site of where the school is now, just seeing that it was a peanut field at one point in time and to see where it
Yep.
is gone and all of the kids that matriculated through KIP GCP, graduated, gone on to school, military, the workforce, whatever, what have
Yep.
you. Definitely a great thing. Now, I know for some of the people for charter schools, a big issue is that some of them have a lottery system. And as we saw in the documentary Waiting for Superman, that you see a lot of kids that it almost kind of feels like Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory, where I
Huh.
get the golden ticket by getting admitted into this school, and I feel that education should not be determined by your zip code or the lucky bounce of a ping pong ball or that your number was picked to get a spot.
Yep.
How do you guys try to combat that whole lottery system, make sure that every kid deserves a fair shot and not just a luck of the draw?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think there's two kind of ways that I think about it. One is that, you know, you hopefully over time are not only like serving the students within your walls better, you're also doing things to help all kids in a community. Whether it's sharing some of the strategies that work, or creating more, a pipeline for more talented leaders to go work in all throughout the community. Um, and in some cases, even partnering with the traditional district to try to do stuff well. That's hard, but there are places where that's happening with charters and districts. Um, and I guess the other way I think about it is just, we have to, and this is a thought that something I've sort of learned in my post-Gaston experience, is really work with families in the community to develop their political power, because all families want are good schools. They don't care if it's charter, district, whatever. They want great schools, and if families and communities, if they're sort of using their power forcefully, I think you can make all schools better. But too often, parents and children are left out of the political process when it comes to schools.
I definitely agree because WRL, they did a special a couple of months back about the gap in high speed internet between mobile, more urban cities and areas like ours, that actually highlighted infield and how kids had to go to, let's say, McDonald's parking lot just so that they can get their homework done. And we're experiencing the problem nationwide due to schools being online because of COVID, that
Yep.
parents and kids are struggling, with trying to adapt, especially if you don't have the means to have high speed internet or multiple kids that need multiple laptops. And it's causing some teachers to reevaluate, saying, man, what am I doing here?
Yeah, no, I think it's yeah, it's really hard as a teacher right now, I think, because you're missing, and you miss so much of the joy that is teaching, it's not person to person. But yeah, the pandemic has accelerated every um, inequity and inequality there is. It, it's if you are wealthy right now, if you have means and resources in your community, you have access to all these things, and more likely you're in school in person because there's the room and the space and all that. And it is really hard to do remote school in rural locations because the infrastructure is not there. But that's a choice our country's made. It doesn't have to be that way. It's that we haven't really invested in the things. We haven't invested in our kids the way we should.
Right. I definitely agree because had, the same infrastructure like in Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, Greensboro, Charlotte would have been invested in the rural areas. Imagine what more success we could have and we could accomplish and say there's no excuses. You got everything you need.
Yep. Yep. We so many and you'd have so much potential of is lost when we don't do that. And so it's really powerful to imagine what we could do, but there's a lot of work to get there.
Yeah, because I knew from the beginning that I wanted to go to college. I always wanted to go to Chapel Hill, but I had a cousin that went. He was like, "I'm gonna tell you what the deal is about Chapel Hill. You can apply if you want, but It is what it is. So I ended up going to UNCG, UNC Greensboro, and I was in Upward Bound. For those of you that don't know,
Yep.
Upward Bound is a program federally funded by Trio that takes kids who are first generation college students, who will be first generation college students, I should say, and then simulate life on a college campus. And the program I was in at Shawan College at the time, not Shawan University, they would go on college tours every Friday, and one of the tours was UNCG. And actually, one of the tour guides was actually from Gaston, went to
Oh,
West. He must have graduated a couple years, well, right around when my cousins and everything were at West. So he knew some of my people. So I was sold on spot to go to
yeah.
UNCG. And to just think, coming from a little rural town and going to school brings up another thing that I have to bring up is that when you come from a smaller rural area, you feel at times intimidated when you get to these big PWIs or
Yeah.
HBCUs where you feel, oh, can I academically, measure up? And it was my first time at UNCG, being around a lot of white folks, and just feeling like, oh, I am a non-ball. I am the outsider because I'm so used to having one way of life, and coming here, I got to learn how to navigate in this new world where not only am I going to be surrounded by the best and the brightest, but I got to find out how do I fit myself in culturally. And as we see now with the climate, all over that, you're kind of feeling like, oh, do I need to distance myself and go to an HBCU so I can have my blackness be validated without being looked at as, oh, you're a separatist.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's like I think we've seen a lot of like, the power of the HBCU experience for so many students, because it is a place where people feel validated and affirmed, and it, and we got it. You have to do a lot. Like Upward Bound does a good job, but like if in a school like Kip Gas College Prep, like I think we were always trying to do it, but probably needed to do more of like preparing young people for what it's like at PWIs, especially that it's not necessarily going to be you got to find your people. You got to be willing to, like you said, sometimes feel very separate, and it's sad that it is that way, but there's a lot more we could do to prepare people,
Yeah,
prepare young. Yeah.
I definitely agree because you have some that end up taking remedial classes as soon as they get into college. Then, as we see with athletics, that's a whole nother can of worms. Where if you can do this, do this. And for those of you that's
Yeah.
listening to the audio, throwing the football or shooting the ball, they're gonna find a way to make sure that you stay eligible. And if you look at the docu-series Last Chance U on Netflix, you see that some of these kids that's taking the JUCO route, may have had personal issues or academic issues that got them kicked out of the major schools, and then they have to go to JUCO to try to get their footing back. But it just once again goes back to what we were pointing out earlier about how more resources need to be invested in communities so that all kids can succeed. So that way, when they step on these big campuses, they're not looked at as, oh, I'm another athlete and the coach is going to make money off me. And if he gets a new job, he could just leave scot free. While me, I'm under lock and key under this contract that says I got to play. But for those of you that don't know, 4-year scholarships are technically not for full 4 years. They're 1 year renewables. So if you're not up to snuff and a new coaching staff comes in, or they find out that, nah, we're going to trim the fat, you're out. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done on the college athletic front to make sure that these students are not just being funneled through, and that the NBA or NFL, while that's nice and all, you need to have a solid backup plan in case you don't get drafted.
Yeah, no, 100%. That college athletics is this, money making scheme disguised as like, under some, as amateurism. And I apologize that I gotta hop off in a minute, but I love what you're saying though about, because it makes me think of, a lot of times we put the work, and even how I've just been talking about it, kind of like we should better prepare the kids. But at the same time, what we really should be doing is changing the culture of the colleges and universities and the culture of our country. That you shouldn't, if you are, there should be more ways for people to thrive at schools, and more emphasis put on like white students and white faculty being competent enough to work effectively and support BIPOC students and staff, whereas we put the responsibility, like you said, on an 18-year-old to survive in a predominantly white environment instead of putting pressure on the environment itself to get better.
Right, I definitely agree. So I know you got a jet, so we can go ahead and close it out. You got any shout outs you want to give before we conclude? Give your social
Jarrell
media.
I know that I'm old, so I don't have any social
Snail mail.
Yes, never. You can always find me, Caleb A. Dolan at Gmail for old school GMS and GCP folks. Especially, I always loved To the Pride at GCP, but those 4 years at GMS were golden to some of my favorite people in the universe. And so all of you all, much love. And Jarrell, it's so cool to catch up. I hope you're not a stranger, and it's great to hear what you're doing out west. And keep safe and do well, man.
Yes, sir. I would love to have you on again, so you can catch this interview on all streaming platforms: Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher Radio, wherever you get your podcasts, and on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/J85. Ladies and gentlemen, round of applause, big welcome, salute to Mr. Caleb Dolan. Thank you so very much for coming on to Beyond the Album Cover.
Thank you so much, Joe. Take care, man.